first episode of Mayor Brown's Quick Insights on Congressional Investigations with Michael Levy and Andrew Ullman. Our goal is to provide in-house counsel and government affairs executives with short 3 to 5 minute perspectives once a week on the most important and challenging issues surrounding congressional investigations. Enough time to convey something substantive, but hopefully not so long that you lose interest. With the election coming up next week, we thought this would be an ideal time to start, as many of you likely are contemplating how congressional investigations may impact your enterprises post-election. I'm Michael Levy. My fellow partner, Andrew Ullman, and I come to congressional investigations from different backgrounds. We think you may be surprised at where we come to similar conclusions and where we may differ. As a former federal prosecutor, I've represented individuals and entities in highly contentious congressional investigations for nearly 20 years as part of my white-collar defense practice. Andrew's background is legislative, having participated in numerous congressional investigations as Republican chief counsel on the Senate Banking Committee. So with that introduction, we'll start. Today's topic is, are there differences between Republicans and Democrats in conducting congressional investigations? Andrew, what are your thoughts?
Well, Michael, I think there definitely are. The general rule of thumb is that Republicans investigate government and government agencies, and Democrats investigate the private sector and corporations. However, I think that general rule of thumb needs to be informed by what the purpose of the investigation is. And Congress uses congressional investigations for 2 primary reasons. The first is to build a legislative record for legislating and moving forward on a policy priority. And so Republicans and Democrats will both use investigations to set forth a factual record to support this legislation that they have. In addition, both parties will use the congressional investigations as a check on the executive branch, using the congressional investigations to obtain information, documents from the executive branch to make sure that they understand what the executive branch is doing, and it serves as part of that checks and balance in our system with the executive branch. In fact, most of the case law on congressional investigations comes from cases between the Congress and the executive branch over the disclosure of information by the executive branch, most famously in the Watergate cases from the 1970s. As a result, you can actually see Congress can be undertaking both investigations for legislative purposes and for oversight of the executive branch at the same time, depending on whether or not the parties have, the Congress is split between Republicans and Democrats the way it is now, where the House is controlled by the Democrats, and that's largely focused on conducting investigations of the administration, whereas the Senate, which is controlled by the Republicans, has largely been focused on building a legislative record for its agenda.
Yeah, so I certainly think that's exactly right. When you've got a party that controls Congress or one of the houses of Congress and a different party in the White House, there's no question that the governmental oversight function is going to be paramount. But from the perspective of private industry, I think it's important to note that there are lots of instances in which Republicans may want to go after big business and Democrats might want to go after big government. So I think, although in general it's correct that Republicans tend to take a more aggressive attack toward big government and Democrats tend to take a bigger attack on big business, it's not always the case. And I think you need to be very careful about the specific dynamics of the particular investigation involved. The other thing that, without a doubt in my mind, is very similar between the way Democrats and Republicans approach congressional investigations in both the Senate and the House is that both parties use congressional investigations very aggressively in terms of frequency, in terms of scope, in terms of tactics. The ability to threaten, to pressure, to leak information, to embarrass companies and individuals is present on both sides of the aisle in equal measure. And that's one of the things that makes congressional investigations so challenging to navigate. I also think that there are some investigations where you don't see any space at all between the way Republicans and the way Democrats take to it. Those are cases with obviously large government waste, like the $7,000 Department of Defense coffee maker or the alleged massive corporate fraud at Enron. Those are cases where Democrats and Republicans are both going to aggressively attack, and you're really not going to get any cover at all. So I think those are some of the most challenging cases to take on, and hopefully as this series goes along, we'll have a chance to explore some of the ways in which you can do that. So, seeming like this is as good a place to stop as any, we hope you've enjoyed this episode of Quick Insights on Congressional Investigations, and we hope you'll join us next week for our second episode, where we address the question, what are the biggest mistakes made in congressional investigations? In the meantime, or at any point, if you've got any questions, please feel free to email us. We'll try to respond either directly or by addressing the question in one of our future episodes. Thank you for joining us.